Hi everyone, in this tutorial I'm going to talk about kind of why and how you might create an AI personality to play against or to play with or both. So first, what the AI personality is when the AI is activated either to auto manage or the AI side you're playing against, there are all sorts of decisions that come along with the selected personality. Both the Union and the CSA have one historic AI personality. It doesn't just choose, this is what everybody's most familiar with, the pre-war policies, but actually when you choose historic, it also plays the historic AI personality. When you choose random, these three, they are kind of random, but what this actually is this is one of the I don't know, 6, 8, something like that, preset AI personalities for either the Union or the CSA. And again, that affects tariff levels, subsidies, policy act, research priorities, probabilities of projects being researched, a whole bunch of other things. So you would want to create this, I think, for a few reasons. The reason I did it was if you want the AI to be improved, but without making their men into kind of like T1000s, you know, fighting just mere men, then I think the way to do this is to create a better AI personality that eliminates several of the poor choices I think are sometimes there in the AI personalities. For example, if you've ever read those intelligence reports and you know that, you know, more than 2 years into a campaign, if you let it go that long, the AI is selecting a whole bunch of admin reform. And it's like, well, why do you need to worry about making projects and acts research more quickly? You've pretty much researched almost all the acts and policies there are. It's wasted money for the AI. So I think this is one of the ways you can get a more competitive AI without just boosting its stats or nerfing your own or imposing a lot of house rules on yourself. Just eliminate their mistakes, and that will make for a more competitive play. Also, if you don't really like micromanaging a lot of the campaign stuff, you can set an AI personality that plays in the background, and then you set that stuff to auto manage, and that's what will be auto managed. So if you want to have a kind of better AI managing your side while you concentrate on moving armies, fighting battles, reorganizing your OOBs, you know, for hours on end, you can do that. And so I think that those might be the kind of two reasons you would want to create an AI personality. And of course, you can create one for the AI you're playing against, create one for your own side, set it to auto manage, and let them play off each other and just worry about the war. So what I'm going to turn to next is I'm going to show you how you do this, and yeah, we'll get you on your way from there. All right, so how you get to your AI personalities: find your Grand Tactician, wherever it is, local files, browse, modding. There should only be one modding Excel spreadsheet here. Go ahead and open that. We're going to get a bunch of, well, 2 of these. Yeah, okay. And I have it set right down here, but if you're not by default coming here, look to see AI personality, and here you'll see what I was describing for you while I had the game up. This is the Union row. Okay, row 4 here are the Union's historical policies. If you set the Union to random, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Of course, I said 6 or 8, and it's 7. Those random policies, the CSA historical personality, all the CSA random personalities. These down here I'll talk about, I think, at the end, but these are certain personalities that kick in. You can probably figure out, they actually describe it to you when you need more men or you need kind of more money. And then those will take over and override the existing personality you have. So we're in our Excel modding spreadsheet. I would suggest maybe making a copy of this and just storing it somewhere else. That's why there's a copy of this in the folder you just saw. So I actually have 2. And when you're creating your own personality, you see what I did is I drafted it down here. And so the stuff that's here, when I get happy with it, I ended up putting it and replacing it in the Union historical line. And so that's why those two match up right now. And what I did before I did that, I could always get this back just by re-verifying the files, or if I copied the Excel and put it somewhere else. But for good measure, if you just click on copy this row and then you paste it down here, this is actually the old Union historical policies. I don't know what, I guess I didn't care about their tariffs and subsidies. Those are pretty easy to change back. But this is a big long line of stuff. So if you don't want to lose it, that's just some housekeeping stuff off the bat. But what you have is pretty self-explanatory, I think, up to a certain point here. But taxes are, as far as I know, only on a scale of 0 to 1. And this is showing you kind of where the slider would go. So whatever the maximum tariff level is, if it's 30%, if it's 50%, 1 means you're going to take 100% of whatever the tariff rate is. Now, if I made it 0.5 and we had a 30% tariff, a maximum of a 30% tariff, here I'm really showing off my mathematics skills, you would have an effective 15% tariff rate. And so you can only set the ratio, and that's important to keep in mind when we talk about subsidies in particular, because if you set the ratio at 0.5 and you start out with a 30% tariff, I think is your max, you'll actually be doing a 15%. If you then take the, my goodness, why can't I remember it? I'll say it's the Tariff Act. I'm sure that's not what it's called, but it's one that allows you to raise a maximum of a 50% tariff. You'll then have a effective tariff rate of 25% because it's half of whatever the max is. Same is true for sales tax. Again, it's a ratio of the slider. 1.0 means it's 100% of the maximum of the slider. If you do the, let me see if I get this right, ACTS, I think that unlock income and corporate taxes, what you want those set to as a percentage of the maximum, that's what those are. I think I made that way more complicated than it has to be. I think far more important is the subsidy line. And what I noticed, and maybe it's just me, I tend to like to maximize several subsidies, if not all of them. And I don't even think that this is my current one anymore. I think I changed this because there's too much in agriculture and too little in eco. But it's a 0 to 1.0 scale, and it's again of whatever subsidies you set the slider to. So when you start off, I think industry is like 5 million max. I know it is for agriculture. Unless you take a certain pre-war policy, then it might go up. So this is going to set it to 75% of your 5 million max. So that's not a whole lot of money that you're not getting. But if you have an AI personality that, say, researches up to King Corn 3, or my goodness, King Corn 4, your agricultural subsidies are going to be massive. And so you will always take 3/4 of whatever the maximum is. That's one of the reasons why I think I justified keeping eco relatively low, because I knew later on in the game we would move through, I would have the AI move through the eco policies, and so the maximum subsidies would be quite large, and 20% of that wouldn't be bad. But I have the AI max out there, industry, military subsidies. Diplomacy, I did it for this union one. Again, be really careful with diplomacy because it is the subsidy that can go the highest. I forget if the maximum amount is like 50 million a year, but that's absolutely massive. If it can't even go to 100 million, it's a lot of money. And so I know with this AI personality, I think I only have them research maybe Diplo 1. And so for the whole game, it will be 50% of that. And that's not too much money lost. But anyways, that's what it is. And that's, you want to keep in mind that you cannot, as far as I know, you cannot change these ratios once the campaign gets moving. I mean, you could edit the AI personality, create a whole new one. You could do it. It would be a lot of work. But this is always a percentage of the maximum available to that side. I did a previous video on selecting and changing what the pre-war policies are. So you can go ahead and watch that video, and I talk about this. But these are the 3 that are going to be taken. If you want to change it, you cannot just change it in here. Again, I cover it in the other video. I'm not going to cover it here. The rest of the policies that are available for that side, including some of the ones you've chosen, are out here as well. But as long as you've kept it to only 3 pre-war policies, these are the ones that are going to be selected. All right, act priority and policy priority. All right, act and policy priorities. These can kind of be talked about together because they are pretty similar, and you're going to go to the same spot to find out what they mean. So up here it tells us priorities 1 equals the most important. So what they're talking about is the column. Things in column 1 will generally be the first act researched. 2 is the next. What is not always clear, but I have found out by doing this on my own, the way this actually works is that the AI will select the first act in this column that is available to it. The policies work the same way, and I'll just give you an anecdote from having played against the union, this particular union AI, several times. I know the first thing it will do is military 1, and then it will jump to legal blockade. Legal blockade is not the first act. I don't know. It's later. But the reason it does that in a Spring 61 campaign is because the other acts that come before it are not yet available to be researched. I've also found out, this is anecdotally, I still have to get confirmation as to why or if this happens or if it just happens every time I play. It seems that the AI tends to go for acts first before it researches too heavily into the policies. I know the anecdote I gave you kind of contradicts that because it starts out with military 1 and then jumps to legal blockade. But that's been my experience. And so I think if you wanted to tailor the acts and policies in such a ways that you might get some more policies earlier, you'd probably have to, I don't know, give lower priority to acts that are earlier researched. I haven't been able to figure it out. I would just say beware that, in my experience, the acts that the AI can do will usually get researched first, even when policies are available for the AI to take. I don't know if it's just because the acts show up first, but don't be too surprised if it seems like you're playing against the AI and it only does military 1 and industry 1 in 1861. Once it gets through a lot of the acts it can do, then it will start going through the policies. But that's also something you want to keep in mind when you're setting those subsidy sliders, knowing that subsidies early on can be a pretty big deal, and that the AI will likely be behind you in subsidy generation because of it prioritizing the researching of acts rather than policies. So how do you know which one of these numbers is which act or which policy? All the way over on the right. So again, I would suggest you maybe take a screenshot of this and hold it somewhere, or go low tech and just write down what is what. But these explain the pre-war policies over here. All right, fine. Common policies. So the union and the CSA have all these common policies. When it's the union, it's this number. When it's the CSA, it's this number. Basically, there's a difference of 100 to keep it pretty simple. So again, that's for policies. For acts, even though they're similar, they're not always exactly the same. Like impressment is called impressment in CSA, but it's called confiscation in the union. And again, the ones that are most closely related almost mirror one another. They are about 100 apart. So you're going to need those and then plug those into, I told you to draft them down below, but just assume that you put it in the historical part. You just plug them in order. So I don't know, my act priorities are 37, 38, 47. That would be Militia Act 2, Militia Act 3, Militia Act 4. And the reason why I did that and I didn't put Militia Act 1 down is because the CSA, which is me in this campaign, gets a bonus if the Union does Militia Act 1 before the war breaks out. So rather than giving myself that bonus, I put that, I think, much later, but I did include it. And I believe the Union usually doesn't select it until after the war breaks out in mid-April. So that's that. Policies, again, the CSA, or the CSA, the AI, in my experience, tends to lag. That's not them, those are projects. But they'll follow out in that order, and you can customize it to whatever you want. I believe this is 12. I think that's the absolute maximum number of policies you can have active with max political subsidies. All right. Those parts are relatively not that time consuming. The more time consuming part is the project's priority. It operates a little differently, and it has to because of the recursive nature of some of the projects. They can be done more than once, and the AI goes back to them and chooses them multiple times. And so you gotta read this. How you read this is that there is basically a project number, and that's what this is. And then there is a 1 or a 0, I guess, to 100 probability that it will select whatever that project is. So this is where it gets a little bit tedious. In order to find out what project that actually is, let's see if I'm going to hit the right thing. Okay, bottom left, projects, here they are. And this is really kind of why I got in this, because there were just a lot of projects that the AI kind of is allowed to take in the default personalities, and it's kind of way too much, and then some of them just aren't that good. I'll mention here, a lot of people hate the machine guns, so I'll talk about how you get rid of and keep the AI from ever selecting some of these. But you would have to find out what is 19. 19 is Springfield rifles, and so for... Oh, that was weird. That was haunting. We were staring in the hall of mirrors there. 19 Springfield rifles. Again, I gave the probability 90% chance that the Union is going to do it. I think on a newer version I made it 99%, just so that the Union is always going to get Springfield rifles. Then 91, whatever. I'm not going to go through all of these, but just to show you, 91 is propaganda, and so there's a 15% chance of that. But remember, it's something that can be chosen multiple times. In retrospect, propaganda is probably a bit too high. So this is tedious. Now, in some of these, you can note that I've put a -1 where by default there are project numbers, and so I don't know, why don't I like 95? Oh, it's administration reform, yeah. So the way you get the AI to not take a project is you put a -1 where that project is supposed to be and set the probability to 0. All right, so you don't want admin reform, you don't want machine guns, you don't want anything, or lots of other stuff. You just find out, and this is why I only changed the historical line. So if I ever want to know, like, oh, what was here before, I just keep all the randoms by default, so that I could find out, all right, so this column here is actually supposed to be project 5. If I want to go back in and add it in, then I can do that. And you fill it out as far as you want to go. Again, this can be time consuming. What I did is I eliminated a lot of the foreign arms imports. I even eliminated a number of the domestically produced arms that felt redundant. I felt Parrott rifles, medium range carbines, Springfield rifles, maybe repeating rifles, maybe a little bit more in the weapons, but not a whole lot more. And then we didn't need to spend more military subsidies on those or diplomatic subsidies on other things. So I did a lot of elimination of projects that the AI might take. That's time consuming, but I also think that's possibly where some of the greatest reward is. The last thing you can do is select the ratio of projects versus buildings. I think currently I've actually set this to 90% in a different Excel. When I had the AI accidentally auto-managing my buildings, it made terrible decisions. It just really squandered money. I think I ended up I was doing a random CSA, and I think it chose agricultural. Let's see if that's even a thing. Yeah, it is. It must have selected King Cotton, or maybe that was one of the policies I took, because it was building farms left and right, and I was just like, I need those agricultural subsidies for farm mechanization, and need volunteers, a whole bunch of other things. So I generally try to plow the money into projects rather than buildings, because after you change the projects and get them to your liking, the AI will, I think, squander less money on poorly considered buildings, and it will focus more of that money on projects. Last thing is the recruiting emergencies and credit emergencies that kick in. So these two are for the union. These two are for the CSA. Again, they're just the AI managing. I really did not like the defaults, and so I don't know why. Yeah, this is not the one that I'm using. But I didn't like the defaults, because particularly when it came, the recruiting emergency is not like a big deal, because it usually kicks in for the union at the beginning of the war, and then I don't see it again. But the problem is that later on they would go into these credit emergencies and they would never be able to get out of them. And this might, I don't know, this might actually be the original default or close to it. I believe what I've done in the actual personality I play against now is I've increased most of these subsidies, because a number of these subsidies actually generate projects that will improve your fiscal position. You get more revenue coming in, or you'll have less expenses going out. And there are projects, right? So we have policies. These must be acts. And I know that I changed these because the color didn't carry over. All right, fine. But I changed what the act priorities were. I know in the policies, or I'm sorry, the projects, these too many similar words here. In the project selection, I also updated that. So that I think now when the union goes into a credit emergency, they really focus on logistics reform. I'll still allow them to do the credit rating improvement, but that is so expensive, and it's a very short-term solution. But I think we also do the trade warfare. We do the trade deals, in the hopes that more trade leads to more tariff revenues coming in. So I did some tweaking there, and I can say that successfully in the last campaign, the union eventually ended up in a credit emergency, but it actually got itself out, which in default, the default AI credit emergency was pretty much just stop spending money on subsidies and just try to improve the credit rating. It doesn't work, because if there's a large underlying imbalance in expenses, they're greater than revenue coming in, you can improve the credit rating temporarily, but then the new debt is just going to drive you down to that next level, and the AI is going to be right back where it started. And so I made changes here. It wasn't enough to just make changes here. I had to go into the campaign preferences, and I had to change how the AI spends money. The short version is that the AI spends way too much money on the Navy that it doesn't effectively use. And so, consistent with the changes I made in here, get the AI to make fewer mistakes, stop spending money on a Navy it doesn't use. Maybe the Navy will eventually be improved in the Spring 61 scenario, and then I can, open that up a little bit. Anyways, we'll talk about campaign prefs and modding those and why you might do that in a different video. But when you finally got this to where you like it, again, you should be drafting it probably down here. You copy it and you want to paste it in, I would say, the historic row. Again, if it's Union Historic up here, CSA Historic, paste it in this line here. Save it, and then don't forget to click Export. You got to export it. And when we do that, and when you export it, it creates this new AI personalities. You got to copy that. And then you got to hop over to the campaign folder and insert it. So after you've copied that, you're going to go back to the main Grand Tactician folder here. Click on campaigns, 001. So this is, Spring 61 goes in this folder. If you're not sure, you click on the scenario description and it will tell you what it is. Delete the old AI personalities, then paste the one you just exported and created. You do that, save it up, close it up, and launch Grand Tactician, and it should be fine. I've had success in changing the personalities mid-campaign. It might be awkward, though, based on other decisions that the AI has made. It may not work right, so my recommendation is always start with a fresh campaign. But this does work. I've got it to work, and it's continually refined, but that's the process. So if you have any questions, if you have success stories, failure stories, go ahead and post them in the comments. Right, the goal of this tutorial and a lot of the stuff is to just get people educated on what they can do with the game. It is pretty highly moddable in several respects, and this should lead to a more enjoyable and competitive experience. Good luck, folks.